Thank you for the invitation, for being here. I have a lot of very interesting presentations, and I think before I start, just one thing that I feel is, like everyone mentioned, digital transformation is going very fast, but I think one thing that we need to consider is that at the same time is going very slow. We're humans. So I think my presentation is going to touch two parts, one more strategical and I think trends that are going on in terms of technology. In 20 minutes you cannot do much, but I'll try to be synthetic. And then a second part where we go from the theory to the practice. I think it's very important to look at the trends, but like everyone mentioned before, you need to make business out of this, and you need as well to integrate this in our own organizations. And I think I call this the next tsunami because it's effectively a tsunami. And I think it's going to be more disruptive than anything we saw so far. And I want to just ask, so here in the audience, who is working in blockchain? Okay. So I would say that you're going to have a tsunami coming, okay? Because this is right now affecting all the infrastructure of any company in the world. And I'm not taking this because I'm involved, it's because this is really serious. The idea of decentralized organizations and how blockchain is impacting any business worldwide is quite big. And I can just give you some numbers, but I'll start with that, is that from 2017, in 2017, next year, around 85% of the banks around the world are going to start using blockchain in their operations. 85%. So banks, I'm not talking about tech companies, not even fintechs. So this shows the importance of what is going on. And I want to mention a couple of things here that are particularly important. So artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, Internet of Things, I think everyone is familiar. And then, of course, swarm intelligence. And I played with the word swarm evolutionary singularity. Everyone is familiar with singularity? More or less? Yes? Okay. So singularity is when man and machine starts more or less combining together. Of course, we can go for a lot of scientific things, but I don't want to talk too much about it. So let's see if this works. No. Otherwise, I just use here. It doesn't seem to. So, so what I want to highlight, and I literally did this kind of images, and I think this as a metaphor. So a tsunami is something that comes and somehow destroys a lot of things, but it's a part of nature. And I think what I try to look here is how the tsunami that is going through. And I think an analogy that you can use with the tsunami of these new technologies between artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and blockchain in particular, I would say that is very similar to what happened in the 19th century with the emergence of electricity. And I think that is, for me, the fundamental problem, fundamental change opportunity as well that we can consider here. So artificial intelligence is going to change everything? Wrong. It changed already everything. So everything we've been talking here so far is based on algorithms. From a PowerPoint presentation to a SharePoint to any database that we're moving is based on algorithms. This is all artificial intelligence. And we've been going and dealing with this, at least in an effectively daily basis, for the last 10 years. More accelerated, but now we're going to a next level. And I think the next level is how this is going to start affecting our performance. And there's a fantastic quote that I like to highlight. There will be only two kinds of jobs going forward. I don't know if you are familiar with the quote, but it's something that I adapt, of course. But one is humans telling machines what to do, and the other one is machines telling humans what to do. And at the moment, 90% of the world population is getting into the second part. I don't think artificial intelligence is going to destroy the work. I think it just is going to transform it. And we're talking about digital transformation in this conference. It's going to go much further because the work as we know it is going to be completely disrupted. And I think right now is how can we adapt to that? And I think that's the challenge and the opportunity. So I'm playing here with Google algorithms. So if you look at what Google says about algorithms, so limited to computing applications, algorithms are hard, algorithms are taking the world, and then I play with this, are we feeling lucky with this? not necessary. If you see the news in the last couple of months, I think, like I've been looking at the news, I get a bit nervous, to say less. So one of the things that I think we can already, like right now, looking from the theory to the practice, is what happened, for instance, with the US elections, and I'm not going to any politics, is that it was the achievement of machines that won the elections. So the way the Trump campaign manipulated social media and news was all done based on social media interactions and creating fake news, and from the fake news, creating viral loops. So I'm not going through any pure data. I'm working in the software. I'll show you a bit of the software that I'm working with some companies. But I think this is right now affecting our lives, okay? And there's just two ways, or we take ownership of this, or someone will take for us. And I hope I think we are a bit sophisticated not to let some radical people do that for us. So I think the point that we need to consider, and I think it's one of the things I've been thinking a lot as a teacher and as a researcher, and I'm as well conducting a project, Intelligent HQ, and data visualization software, is anyone is familiar with swarm intelligence? No? So swarm intelligence is a part of artificial intelligence that reproduces systems of nature. Let's say, if an ant wants to find a sugar piece in some part of the room, you'll find the fastest way and tell all the other ants to find this piece of sugar. And then, of course, the ants leave a pheromone, and you find it faster. So it creates a pattern. So all the scientific artificial intelligence is based on patterns and finding patterns that work fast to find solutions. So this is swarm intelligence. When we apply this to artificial intelligence, what computers and patterns start doing is creating super patterns. So they understand the business model that is better for us, the trends, they analyze everything, and they can go in history for 10 years, 20 years, in the future probably 100 or 200 or even more, as long as there's data. And they create the right pattern for us to analyze and go forward. The problem is that we are humans. And as humans, we've been somehow adapting our swarm environment because we breastfeed our children. We still have a bit of swarm, but we're trying to kill that. And I think this is right now applying to machines, of course, brings a lot of considerations and a lot of questions. But of course, we are an evolutionary nature as humans, and machines are part of us. So it's just a continuation. And of course, this will bring a lot of questions for business. And I think right now is how can we use this for us and not against us. So we are swarm intelligence organisms, all of us. We might adapt towards the culture of our country, towards the culture of our tribe, and so forth. What artificial intelligence is doing is precisely right now applying this for business, for politics, for anything else. And I think right now in the organizing systems, there's two parts that you need to consider when you look at artificial intelligence and blockchain and a lot of other technologies, is that there's centralized organizations, which is the case of most of our organizations here, and decentralized. So a very simple example is a spider. It's a centralized organization. If you cut the leg of a spider, probably the spider dies. And the starfish. If you cut the leg of a starfish, the starfish multiplies. If you start applying this to business and to technology, this becomes a bit more complex. Because in technologies, if you create decentralized organizations, what happens is that most of us are middlemen, brokers. We work towards other organizations, we adapt business models. If you create technology that permeates to avoid centralized organizations, then this becomes a complex thing. So I'm not going too much through this, but I just highlight in kind of this pinkish, whatever language, some patterns. So this is the 34 most disruptive technologies that we have at the moment. I'm not going through all of this. But as you see, all of these ones that are in this color, they are related with artificial intelligence. And we have things like blockchain, general purpose machine intelligence, quantum computing, human augmentation, and so forth. So all of this is actually happening as we speak. Of course, one thing is talking with mathematical computers and scientists. The other thing is looking at our business. What we want is solutions for business, and we should not get out of that. So moving forward, what is the solution? So I think we need to consider always, and I think there was fantastic, I loved the keynote speakers in the morning, the idea that we are humans and that we need to have a transformation. and understand the digital transformation. I really like to hear that management is just around 100 years old, at least as a business professional area, and it's true. We are a species with thousands of years of history, but as management species, we are quite young. So I think this brings us to human, tech, and evolution. And the very important thing is the separation between individual and business. And I think most of our challenge in digital transformation are precisely how to leverage the individual part of us and then the business part of us. And I think here we have a couple of things that are happening as we speak. And this is the singularity versus the evolutionary substrate. So at the moment, we are already, all of us are sleeping with a phone close of us that has at least 16 sensors that knows more or less what we're doing, if we are actually healthy or not, how much we walk, how much we don't walk, and eventually knows even much more things that I don't want to talk about it. So we are right now becoming partly, not robots, but partly cyborgs. I know that is probably a scientific word, but it's happening. We sleep with our phones. Some of us probably spend more time with our phones than actually with our partners, but there's a lot of considerations to take. And I think the other consideration to take is that as we digitalize in the DNA, and this is not in 10 years, it's now, Google has been digitalizing the biggest hospitals in the UK, and it has more solutions for healthcare than any company on the planet. So the quantity of digitalization of our own DNA is going to operate a lot of transformations that are going to create a somehow singularity. So the good thing about singularity, at least the positive side, is that it might help us become better humans, but that comes the swarm part. As swarm organisms, we're not necessarily rational. And you just see what is happening around the world, and you see that rationality is not necessarily the best feature of mankind. So I think the point right now is that we are reaching the point of machine intelligence and mankind. What is going to happen after this? And that is the question that we need to consider. I'm not going too much on this, just want to leave the questions, because this is quite big questions that we have to answer as we go. But I think the point right now is, in the complex ecosystem of our human singularity, and there's human singularity and there's human-machine singularity. I want to provoke this, okay? It's important to separate the two things. So what distinguishes is our capacity of creativity and work in teams. Of course, we cannot do this without technology. And right now is how can we use technology to do this right. And then it brings me to some things. There's a couple of quotes that I'm always playing around, and I keep on adding things. This is a quote that a slide that I'm actually repeating, but I do it deliberately. So everyone here is a brand. I don't know if you thought about that. Everyone is a brand here. We are a media player, even if it's putting silly things on Facebook. It's media. We are a startup because we have to reinvent ourselves for the next job, for the next company that you're going to be working after the one we have right now, so we need to adapt our own business model. We have innovation because we need to continue learning. That's what everyone here in the room is doing. And we're starting to be as well artificial intelligence driven, because we're starting to make our decisions based on data. And more is going to be a singularity between the decisions, our own human instinctive emotions and decisions, and the machines that we are using to that. What is interesting right now, and this plugs to what was said in the morning, is that every company is exactly the same. So the difference between each of us and any company is almost none, from a pure conceptual perspective. So all companies have a brand, they are media, they are financial, they are big data, and all the things that we are as well in a small scale. I think the challenge, and of course, like a lot of you mentioned in the morning, is how can we make the best digital transformation out of this and take this in the right way going forward? So I think this is the ecosystem that I right now wanted to consider. I tried to create a slide based on different things. So the next or the present tsunami that we're living at the moment. So we have an entire digitalization of the world economy, the world society, and the world species. Of course, I'm not talking about environment. There's other questions. I'm working with Greenpeace, and I'm actually very excited and nervous because of what is going on in terms of our world. But I'm not going to talk about that. So we have the digital life. We have the future of mobility, which is Internet of Things and all the things related. Smart city concept. We have the Industry 4.0 that is starting right now. We have financial systems being completely digitalized. the same with healthcare, the same with governments. For instance, governments is a particularly interesting case because if you look at registration of land, some of the registration of lands have been not updated for 100 years, 200 years, and it's something that needs to be updated. So blockchain is answering some of these questions, and that's why it's becoming so disruptive and so big. So then we have three things that are all talking with each other. So at the moment, there's around 500 million devices in the world. And in the next couple of years, you're going to have 500 million connected devices. I want to be around that. And the next couple of years, we're going to have 7 billion connected devices. So that means every device is going to talk with each other. In one way or the other, this is going to create a lot of data. I mentioned about artificial intelligence, and then it comes blockchain. So why blockchain is so powerful? Because blockchain, which ironically was the technology behind Bitcoin, and whatever you like Bitcoin or not, it's not just about Bitcoin at the moment. Actually, it has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It just proved the concept. It proved the concept that you can actually have a decentralized model based in smart contracts where I can send money from my computer to any other computer in the world that has a smart contract with me. So in theory, this is perfect because you just need to have a very powerful computer to make sure that my data is official me and the data, and that's a smart contract that tells me, okay, Dinis is passing the money to one of you in Switzerland from London. So in theory, this is already possible. You just need to have an operation with Bitcoin. So blockchain permitted this using the technology of blockchain, of the smart contract. So right now is applying this to almost anything. So if at the moment each of us has around 10 different personalities, we have the elector part of us, we have the health part of us, we have the political part of us, we have the business part of us, the bank account. So if you look at this, it's probably 10 business different singularities that we're creating. So the blockchain can actually compromise and create one identity for all of us. And you can see that this for healthcare, for a lot of these things can be fantastic. It can be as well scary because that means if there's one single identity, someone can plug into the identity and understand everything about us. But that is happening right now. So the new companies, they're going to be able to do this right, are going to be the next Googles and probably replace Google. So I think the challenge right now is how to do this in the right way. And just to finish on the blockchain is based on the decentralized. So that means that every computer that has an identity and a smart contract can communicate with anyone around the world. The point is that as we be developing technology for this, and at the moment the biggest developers of technology is mostly IBM, Microsoft, and a lot of players like that. That means that we're going to have different variations of blockchain. It might be a centralized one, or it might be a decentralized one. And that is right now the fundamental shift that you're going to see the next times. And this brings, of course, a lot of questions. It brings questions right now about precisely the authentication, because, of course, if I send money from me in London to anyone here in Switzerland, if I do it in Bitcoins, I actually can do it. And there won't be any commission. I just send you the money. But if I do it in pounds towards Swiss franc, then I need to see what is the commission. And then it starts becoming the middleman. So in theory, it's wonderful. In practice, it's a bit more complex, as you can imagine. And as well, if we start using for our companies, let's say if the company decides to use blockchain technology, Philips or any other company here, you can actually use this to create identity for instance, Philips healthcare division. Sorry, I'm just using Philips as an example, although I worked with Philips previously. But in the sense, if you want to use this for healthcare, you can have access to a part of your clients through a single token or single identity that blockchain can permeate. But this is very beautiful in theory. Right now is how to put this in practice, bearing in mind that you have to consider regulation, that you have to consider cybersecurity, and all the other things that we know because we are humans, because it's not so easy to that. So that's where it comes, this complex slide, and I think from closed and centralized Internet of Things networks that we are right now, before 2005, we are right now to open access IoT networks. So Internet of Things is going to bring as well a different level of complexity, and in the sense that as the devices start having data and understanding what is happening around them, they start thinking. And if the processment of devices becomes more advanced, this brings a lot of questions and considerations and opportunities, of course. But it's quite a big thing. For instance, anyone heard about the DAO? decentralized autonomous organization, so you heard about it. So the DAO was a project that was mostly was like a crowdfunding campaign, if you put it in a simplistic way. Actually, I've been working with the team. And what they decided to do, they decided to do a crowdfunding campaign to create a software part. And they let different developers to put money, like in any crowdfunding campaign. The point is that this was a decentralized organization, so anyone could put the money and organize it. So in the space of 1 month, the organization got more than $100 million, I think 150, more or less. And what happened is that after 1 month, and I saw this, I was with people, and everyone was as astonished as me, because of course the VCs behind developers start putting money. So that means it was the fastest growing crowdfunding campaign in the world. This was in June, by the way, so not a long time ago. And 1 month afterwards, there was one of the developers that was working on the code. So mostly this crowdfunding campaign was all based on code. So all the code, people would invest through the code. Not in necessarily Bitcoin, but through Ether. This was through the Ethereum platform. And one of the developers took $50 million out of the campaign after 1 month. So this brings one problem that then it starts a lot of civil wars between the organization. Okay, it's a decentralized organization. If someone takes the money, that means the code was not correctly done. So it's a technology problem. But there's a regulation problem, there's a legal problem, because the money was from the community. So this brings, as you can imagine, a lot of questions. And this is happening as we speak. Okay, don't think this in 5 years. This is now. And you have to look at this. I know there is another thing to look at, but we have to look at this. So, of course, this point right now is that with the open access of Internet of Things devices and distributed networks, this is going to be much more complex. And I think from a distribution, from a transformational digital operations for our companies, I think what we're going to have to do, and I think I'll try to simplify this, I don't think this is going to be the end of the world. It's going to be fantastically open a lot of new opportunities, but we have to try to shift our brain for another side of way of thinking. Because what you're going to have is different platforms like we have right now, Google, that will permeate for us to go and put in our identity. And this is going to bring a big problem, especially if you have a global decentralized platform that can actually become big. And that's the challenge. You're going to have a decentralized global platform, or you're going to have a centralized part. So if you have a centralized part, we have the same as what happened with the internet, that the internet is more or less controlled by 5 big organizations. If it's decentralized, it might be a Wikipedia model. But there's a lot of considerations because we are all regional. We have our passions according to the countries where we are from, according to the regions. So it's not necessarily so easy from a global perspective. But the technology in itself is global. And most of the cyber hackers right now, they understand this. For instance, the Ddos attack that happened 2 weeks ago, you heard about it? My websites were victim of that, and most of the websites in the world. And what happened is that the hackers attacked one of the main platforms for registration of the DNA of the websites using Internet of Things devices. So they hack Internet of Things devices around the world, and through this Internet of Things, they attack the biggest websites on the planet, from Twitter to even Amazon, which Amazon has the servers of the FBI and CIA. So that brings a bit of considerations for us. And you saw the US elections where mostly whatever is Russian hackers, whatever, but a lot of things happened there as well. And the irony is that the US government couldn't control the hacking attacks. So this is happening as we speak. And now I'm going to try to go a bit faster. So some questions that we need to consider, especially in the area of cybersecurity. I think that's probably the fastest thing for us to do. For instance, I'm helping a business network fund in the US, in the UK, that is actually managing quite hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. And they asked me to help them with their website, and they didn't know where the server was. So that's a very simple thing. A business fund of $200 million that is not taking his website serious. So this tells you something, it does ring you some questions and some scary questions. So people are still not taking this serious, okay? And this is, I know that you have a lot of challenges within the organizations. I've been there as well, and I'm there every day. But this is actually very scary because if you're not taking your server correctly and you don't control it, someone will do for you. And someone from a server of a website, if you look at the Panama Papers was they managed to access to all the documentation through a simple bug in the CMS of the website. Okay, so I don't need to say more. You understand the considerations. I'm not going through the 7 points, but I think this is going to be an interesting and challenging thing to do. So I think the point here, and I think this is Don Tapscott, where I took some of these ideas and I've been interacting with him, that wrote The Blockchain Revolution, a book that I suggest that you buy, please. He wrote as well the first book about the internet, so he's been actually correct in some things, so buy the book, Blockchain Revolution. I don't have any shares on that, but it's really very useful to understand what we're talking about. So he talks about the trust protocol. So all of us here, in the end of the day, the value of our companies is about trust. It's about the trust of the brand, about the trust of each of us individuals working for the company, and about, of course, the products and the service that we create. So if the technology of artificial intelligence and blockchain, whatever name we call it, can permeate that and can do it in the right way, that's fantastic. But there's a lot of questions there. But the point is that this is irreversible. And I think it's like when the internet started or when the electricity started. I think the electricity is better because electricity changed probably more radical the world than even the internet. It disrupted the entire cities, but it took 100 years. So actually 200 because it started in the 18th century. So what is going to happen is that this is going to take 5 years. And as we get everything digitalized, we need to have these technologies to create the centralized management of all of these things. So whatever is blockchain technology or an evolution of blockchain technology is already happening. So I think the challenge right now is how we manage this in the best way possible. And I think the idea of the wide ledger smart contract, so if you put it in a simplistic way, blockchain is an Excel, a macro multi-meta Excel, where you can actually put all the data to the world. And in this Excel, there will be person A has this data, person B has this data. And then, okay, what is going on between the rows? And the same can happen with companies and everything else. So in theory, it's beautiful. In practice, it's much more complex. But it's the land registration, I mentioned that proposally for you to think about it. For instance, Sweden is right now trying to apply this. And for instance, Sweden actually right now was in the news today that they want to create the first digitalized currency, which is wise. If you put everything digitalized, they control the country currency much better. Of course, the problem that you need to ask, and if you work in finance like I do, is, okay, what do you do with all the money that you're creating artificially? Because if you look, anyone knows what is the debt of the world at the moment? Numbers? So it's between $150 trillion to $300 trillion. This is official numbers from Bloomberg and the United Nations, so that's not a complete conclusion, but it's around $200 trillion. Anyone knows how much is the world economy at the moment? $70 trillion. So we have almost 3 times more debt than real money, real economy. And the point is that the only country, or one of the only country probably in Europe and around the world that has a cash flow positive is Germany, that has $150 billion or euros of cash flow. But if you look at how much money does Apple has in terms of cash flow, anyone? $225 billion of cash flow. So at the moment, Apple is wealthier than Germany from a cash flow perspective. So this happens, this brings a lot of considerations when we look at technology and put it in practice, okay? I don't need to say more. And of course, as one thing that is going to happen, so the flash crash, just on that level, I'll try to be synthetic, that happened with the pound a couple of weeks ago, was partly 2 algorithms that crashed because of the value of the pound, and they took a huge part of the money, the value of the pound. But this happens is that the algorithms are seeing that this is not rational. So I work with artificial intelligence. So that means if you tell the algorithms that the Bank of England is creating artificial money, that is not rational. If US is doing the same, if China is doing the same, what's the rationality on this? So you have to explain to the algorithms that it's not necessarily about rationality. And that becomes a very tricky thing to see. And that's the biggest challenge with artificial intelligence at the moment, is that the algorithms are starting to rationalize something that we, all of us as humans, are not. And this is quite scary because the algorithms at a certain point will just crash. And 80% of the money in the world, or 90%, is managed by algorithms. All the trading in the world at the moment, 80% is managed by algorithms. So we have some risks, systemic risks. We have a lot of opportunities. But one of the things that I would like to take, and if you don't take anything from my presentation, take one. We have to take this serious for each of us and for our companies. because otherwise we become irrelevant. And I know there is another layer of complexity because all of us are trying to get money to pay the bills and selling more, but there's a lot of things that are quite important to take this. So I'll try to move forward. So I think the idea of electricity is critical, and I think the idea that is changing the infrastructures. And I just want to play with this. This is more from a digital transformation. I like to use metaphors around history, and this is the process of the Christ story applied to digital story. So all of us at the moment are like part of a religion that is our companies, and we are creating a process. Is that we start with the active story of our founders, about our DNA of the company, and then we go to invite other people, disciples, and we create a storytelling. We do this right now with digitalization. If you want to simplify the process of digitalization, is understand this exactly. It's one of the things I'm working a lot with my partners and clients is understanding the story correctly and the model around the story. And this is a very important thing, is that I love this metaphor of using evangelization in terms of digital. And as well, understanding the parts of the communities that we are present. And I think it's very important to understand that all of us are part of communities, and our business are about that. And artificial intelligence, in the end of the day, is mapping semantics around this. And I'll finish with one of the things of that. So I think this, of course, brings a couple of questions. The first thing is a state of disorder. And I like to play around with Nassim Taleb. He wrote a book last year or 2 years ago about anti-fragile. Is that at the moment, with everything that is so complex around us, it's about our fragility and our capacity to manage chaos. And I think this is the biggest problem right now with all these different technologies that we are operating. And I think a couple of things that are really important, just 3 keywords for me that are critical. The idea of focus. We need to focus in our business, in our communities, in our long tail. I think you're familiar with the book of Long Tail. And of course, creativity. Creativity to be able to strive on the middle of all of this with some sense of humor. And of course, creating value out of the chaos. So I think the idea of black swans as well. This is, there's a guy that I work with that I really like as an advisor for the British government. And one of the things, he did a conference a couple of years ago that disrupted me a lot, in the sense that we're going to see more and more things like Trump, Brexit happening towards us. In the last 5 years, we had the riots in the UK, in London. We had riots in France. We had the Brexit. We had Trump. We're going to have, in space of time, big disruptions coming. And this is not, you don't need to be a scientist to do this, to look at this, but it's going to happen faster. So we need to be prepared for this and have some strong capacities on this. And of course, the black swans are not necessary, so kind of unrealistic, but if you are prepared, it's better. So a couple of things practical that I think it's important to look, and this is, I think, in terms of, let me see if this, yeah, sorry, what makes a successful mindset of a leader. And I think the idea that we need to look is that, in one end, we have all of these macro things, so the technology, the big data, social media, Internet of Things, and of course, artificial intelligence and blockchain. And I put blockchain as a foundation basis because it touches everything. And it's going to touch much more because ultimately, as we create an identity, for instance, Deloitte right now is working in a process of creating a digital identity. So if it creates a digital identity that governments can use worldwide, that means all the government data can be in one single place. And that's ultimately the challenge of blockchain. The point is doing this in the right way. So I think the point, of course, is that we need to have a sense of community, a sense of place, and all the basic things. And like some of you said in terms of digital transformation, the challenge is how do we do this in the right way? So, almost finishing. So, sorry, Matt. That's the problem with slide shares, if you click in the wrong way. So, I think to look at the big data, I think most of the things we can see this looking at big data. And I think if you look at the big data, for instance, I've been analyzing the US elections, and I found some interesting conclusions that mostly was telling that Trump is going to win. And I didn't want to believe it, but it happened. So I think in terms of big data can actually tell us. And I think we should not do business without looking at proper data. But data not in the sense of all the data that you're creating, but the right data towards our business models and interdisciplinary areas that we have. Yeah, and I think it's almost the last ones. So I think, and of course, how can we ride the tsunami? That means all of us here have to be, in one end, innovating people, change management people, research, engagements, analytic consultants, media planning, and social media marketeers. All of us. And please, one of the things I always I scream to my students is that if my students know less about social media than me, something is wrong. And it's not because I'm obsessed with social media, it's because you have to use the tools that you have. And of course, we cannot lose. I think what happened with US elections, independent of the political things, is that the way they managed social media was very, very well done, and Clinton underestimated that. So using social media is still super powerful, not necessary for the fashion and for the trends and for the cats and the babies' photos and videos, but to business and to do it right. And yeah, this is it. I finish. I think right now, I think just this is and you can see this in my SlideShare presentation. The idea is map digital ecosystems, and I think that is for me the most important thing. Create an automation roadmap, and I think this is what more or less we were talking here. And this is something that I created in terms of creating the visualization. And I'll finish with the data visualization that I'm doing. So this is what my company and some of my partners are doing. So, and I think this can be done by any company here. Some of you might have access to this kind of softwares. But this is particularly important for us to understand what is happening around us. This is the data visualization of the most influential people in blockchain in the world. One thing that is interesting, and I'll finish with this, because artificial intelligence, at the end of the day, is applying patterns, mathematical patterns, to find the best solutions for the problems that you want to answer. So let's put it in a simplistic way. Of course, if you put this to machines and you put this inside of us, we'll have to take our instinctive and start using these mathematical patterns. So here, you have like these kind of small things in different colors. So this is different areas of influence of blockchain influences. And two things, just to finish this, that are particularly interesting from a business development perspective is understanding the flocks or the parts that are important for your business, like conferences like today, events, books, research. And the other thing is the influencers. So some of these people are influencers. For instance, I'm somewhere here, and then you have other people that have different influences around you. And if you understand these influences, these people around you, can actually map your ecosystem, your community, and use data and artificial intelligence in a very simple and most effective way. And I finish with this. My contacts and presentations are here, and thank you so much.
Yep.